Hey everyone, it's Conrad Bobilek here, CEO of Investors from Real Estate and best-selling international author of Australian Real Estate Investing Made Simple. Welcome to today's video. The market's changed now considerably in Melbourne, especially with the recent RBA rate cuts. And it was a small cut of 25 basis points, but it was very significant in its nature because it really stimulated the market at large. And I guess it kind of shifted the consumer sentiment in the right direction. So it wasn't so much the amount of money that people were saving from their mortgages, because really on the $1 million loan, you're probably saving $200, per month, 250. It's not a big deal. The big deal is that it was a cut and it was also the right direction. And these are what people really needed. They wanted to feel confident that the rates cuts are coming. And usually the RBA does a number of rate cuts. They don't just do one isolated rate cut. And this is what the market was really waiting for and hoping for to a large extent, to see the direction of the RBA and interest rates. So I did this video because I wanted to highlight the advantages and disadvantages of buying different types of properties in Melbourne, whether you want to buy an apartment, a townhouse, an old house, or also a brand new property in a house and land package. There's a lot of options, and a lot of people are confused about how do you analyze these opportunities. And also, there's been massive changes in Victoria, specifically in Melbourne, with the government designating 60 activity centres or suburbs, which I'll show you exactly which they are, where they're changing planning and permit zones into mixed usage and high density developments, where previously there was a lot of restrictions. So sit back, relax, grab a coffee or an energy drink. Welcome to today's video. Let's unpack these topics in a lot of detail. Now, a bit of a disclaimer, I'm not here to give you any financial information or advice. So by all means, this is purely educational purposes only. Seek any professional advice before you do anything, but make sure the person you're dealing with has the exact results that you want to achieve. A bit about myself. I've got a YouTube channel. I'm also a real estate agent, ex-mortgage broker, ex-banker for NAB, ex-financier. The most important thing about myself is I'm an actual property investor myself, and I've also spent the last 30 years really involved in the financial service sector in this industry, being obsessed with property investing. I now run a company called Investors Prime Real Estate, where over the last 11 years, I've been sourcing properties in Melbourne's highest capital growth suburbs for my private clients. And I've got clients now that are buying an 8th, 9th, 10th property in 11 years, which is incredible. The lives have changed. I'm actually writing a book with case studies, and I'll be featuring those clients in my book to show you how they went from zero to hero in 5 and 10 years. So stay tuned for my future upcoming books. By the way, I also want to thank you guys for buying my books. I've been featured on Amazon and other shops multiple times as #1 bestseller. You can see that there's a Real Estate Investing Made Simple and Finance Made Simple. So I really want to thank you guys for supporting me. If you want to get a copy of my book, Real Estate Investing Made Simple, which is written specifically for the Australian property market, jump onto realestateMadeSimple.com.au, and you also get a bunch of freebies. If you want to learn about how to smash your mortgage in record time, or how to structure your property portfolio correctly, i.e. buying properties in individual names versus trusts, the pros and cons, definitely get a copy of my finance book, Australian Property Finance Made Simple. Jump onto bookonfinance.com.au and get a copy, and you also get a bunch of freebies. That's enough of my shameless plug. Now, let's get into it. So I know what's going to happen. The market's going to recover, and there's going to be a lot of companies out there offering reports and special reports about hotspots and future boom areas of Melbourne. And they've got an algorithm. They've got some whiz-bang new AI algorithm that no one has. They're the only ones that have it, and they're going to make you rich. I can tell you now, the biggest thing I learned from Warren Buffett is be wary of geeks bearing formulas. These companies will fail. The reports are worth nothing. I've been downloading these reports for the last 30 years. Before there was AI, they were just ebooks. And 99% of the times, they're completely wrong. The areas they usually flog are South Bank, Docklands, or house and land packages in Melbourne. Both of those are terrible options for you as an investor. I've never seen one report say buy in Port Melbourne or buy in Essendon or buying Elwood, or buying Carlton Collingwood. It's always a new house on land estate where they're paying $50,000, $60,000 commissions to these companies that masquerade themselves as so-called independent experts. So be careful with these hotspot reports. They're complete rubbish. They're not worth the electronic ebook paper they're written on, so I will definitely avoid them. But I want to unpack the topic of what is a good area, what's a bad area, and I want to go through different types of vehicles to build wealth, because as the market's going to recover now and we're going to be entering the next phase of the property cycle, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty from a lot of people about knowing which property to buy. So I want to kind of put it in the context of land tax, serviceability, things that you might not think about, because a lot of times people think of property in the context of capital growth and which one's better, but not in the context of finance and leverage, which is the key. So welcome to today's video. It's going to be a very interesting video today because I'm going to unpack a couple of topics and I've been really getting a lot of questions on from my private clients and just emails from people that I've been looking after for the last, 10 years, really. Now, what's happening in Melbourne? So CoreLogic results for February 25 show that Melbourne is now the cheapest major capital city housing market in the nation. But remember, there's no such thing as Melbourne, guys. Melbourne is extremely fragmented. It has the highest and the biggest urban sprawl in Australia. Melbourne, an average house in Melbourne, guys, is 1.5 million, okay? Forget about this 800, okay? You can't even get a decent house on land package anymore for 900,000. Like entry-level house on land packages, just a normal four-bedroom house from Metricon and a shitty block is $1 million. But remember, we have massive urban sprawl and we have extreme market fragmentation. So we have suburbs where there are properties selling for lots of money. We've just had a listing recently in Melbourne, for nearly $100 million, which is incredible. But obviously, there are suburbs that properties sell for 10, 15 million, like Toorak, Hawthorn, for example. Plenty of properties selling for 10, 15 million, 20 million, plus. If it's a historic mansion, obviously it's going to go for more. But there are also just decent suburbs, like let's say Hampton, for example, okay, where you need $4 million, $5 million to buy a decent property. So Melbourne is expensive, but there's a massive fragmentation of demographics, and also there's a massive range of property prices. So the median price is just the middle property in Melbourne. So don't pay too much attention to median price movements. It's not the best way to gauge what Melbourne is doing and what suburbs are doing. But definitely it is one way to gauge the pulse of the market. That's why we're talking about it right now. Melbourne's median dwelling value was $772,561 at the end of February 24. 14% below the national average. Melbourne shouldn't be this cheap because Melbourne, is the biggest city in Australia now, 7 million people. But like I said, Melbourne urban sprawl is so extreme. You have suburbs on the extreme far edges of Melbourne where there's no infrastructure, nothing, no transport, no roads, no schools. And I'm going to show you one of those suburbs today, Thornhill Park, which was featured and I don't want to mention names, I don't want to get people embarrassed, but there is a number of research companies that have featured Thornhill Park as one of the hotspots coming up in Melbourne, which is very interesting. It is a terrible investment. I wouldn't even recommend it to my worst enemy. But anyway, supposedly these experts have AI working with them, and AI knows everything. Who can we question? Who are we to question AI? We're just mortal beings. So Melbourne definitely went from a negative 0.3% last year to now positive movement of 0.4%. So we can definitely see there was a downturn and now Melbourne's coming back up, which is great. It was inevitable anyway. If you listen to my videos, I didn't expect the rate cut, to be honest with you, so early in the piece. I thought the rate cut would come later on in July after the June quarter numbers came in, but the RBA pulled the trigger early, which is great. The market's recovered and it's already taking off very slowly. Now, remember, the property market's like a big old steam engine. It takes a long time to get going, but once it's going, it's virtually unstoppable. So at the beginning, it's just very slow movements. The improved affordability of Melbourne's housing market follows subdued growth over the last 5 years. Yeah, the last 5 years have been pretty average. Not in all areas. Not all areas are made equal in Melbourne. As illustrated in the following table, Melbourne dwellings have risen by only 8.2% over 5 years, the slowest growth of any major capital cities. There are suburbs that have doubled in that period of time, but remember, we have house and land estates that are completely inefficient, and there is no growth in those estates. There are 96 estates in Melbourne, and I've done house and land videos before, where there is virtually no growth. It's even to the point where it's below inflation, which means that if you buy a 550 house and land package, you're actually losing equity and capital every year in real terms. So definitely, in terms of capital growth, if you look at from peak, Melbourne negative 0.64%. So it's from the highest level, it's down, not a big deal. From March 22, past 5 years, 8.2, 10 years, 46.9%. You can see Sydney 67.2, Brisbane 90%, Adelaide 93.3. Hobart 87.1. What that tells you is that we've got a long way to catch up, and we will catch up. It will be inevitable. The market will take off. Now, we won't catch up with a median price will overtake Sydney because, like I said, we've got very cheap suburbs in Melbourne and we have extreme demographic fragmentation. So that means there are suburbs that are very poor and they are not moving anywhere. They are staying and they're becoming slums of the future. And that's one of the reasons we have an escalated amount of youth crime in Melbourne, because all the youth crime always comes from the outer suburbs, Cranbourne, Dandenong, all the areas, St Albans, Broadmeadows. They never come from Hawthorn, do they? From a nice family. They always come from disadvantaged postcodes. So we're going to see more and more of that. We're not going to see a uniform growth in Melbourne. We're going to see fragmentation. The rich are getting richer at a very fast pace. The middle class is disappearing and the poor are getting poorer. And there's going to be massive gaps between wealth based on real estate ownership. It's just the reality of what it is, The reason I'm telling you is because I'm not here to educate you on the structure of society. We're here to make money out of this thing called property investing. So you got to be aware of all these factors, because where you park your money is going to determine how much money you make and how quickly you can get your second and third property. So definitely, in terms of comparison, dwelling across the combined capital cities have risen by 34% over the last 5 years, and regional areas 57.8%, where Melbourne has only risen 8.2%, which is very low, comparatively speaking, to even regional centres, which is fantastic because it's just going to go up and take off, which is what you wanted to do. You want to buy cheap and obviously make the money on the upward trend. So you can see there, if you look at different factors, one thing that I look for is first home buyers. And in September 24, you could see there in Victoria, as a percentage, in terms of lending, first home buyer loan commitments, 3,082. First home buyer ratio of dwellings sold, 41.5%, which is pretty good. It's pretty high. And then 37% of first home buyers have purchased houses from the market. So the rest is pretty much second home buyers or investors. Remember, investors only represent a very small part of the market. It's not a significant part. The whole market, guys, is driven by owner-occupiers. They're the ones that are driving the prices. We're just kind of piggybacking onto them. But we're looking at different things. We're not emotionally motivated as investors. We've got to be completely unbiased. The blue line represents investors and the orange line represents first home buyers. In 2022, we started to see an increase in interest rates. So the serviceability and borrowing capacity of first home buyers diminished. And look, under 750, it's very difficult to get anything decent in Melbourne in a house and land estate. As I mentioned before, you need about $1 million to get an average metric on. I'm not talking about anything special, just an average, 4 bedroom, 3 bathroom, double lock-up garage, the normal block, you need $1 million now, $950 to $1 million. So you can see that from 2020, we've had a decline of first home buyers in the market, and then we've had an increase in investors because rents went up on the back of rising inflation, and so rental yields became attractive. And remember, the money's got to go somewhere. So investors are well and truly back now, buying up significant chunks of the market, and you can see the percentage of the mortgages that are written for investors and home buyers. There's a gap that's emerging, and that gap will create the next property boom. And investors always know what's happening as a group of people. They go and chase capital growth and they chase rental yields, and the rental yields are attractive. Capital growth becomes more attractive. More of them go into property investing. One of the biggest changes in Melbourne has been designated activity activity centres that have been revealed against specific suburbs in Melbourne. The Victorian state government has released the draft plans for activity centre programs as part of the secondary phase of community engagement for each of the 10 activity centres across Melbourne, which are earmarked to facilitate 60,000 new homes close to jobs, transport and services by 2051. In fact, there's going to be 60 activity centres that are going to be designated for changes in zoning and density in order to stop the urban sprawl of Melbourne and try to build more houses around train stations, schools and existing transport and infrastructure, medical clinics, because we have very low density, suburbs. So you can see that the Victorian government unveils 24 more areas and we want to add high-rise living. And this is on the back of Jacinta Allen's planning system. And I'm going to give you some ideas and some feedback about what they're doing and what hope they have of succeeding. But let's just unpack it a little bit more, because it does have an impact on things. Most of Melbourne's activity centres are located in the east and southeast, which you can see there. There's a map there. You have activity centres that are piloted, and then you have the train and tram activity centres, which are closest to the city, close to suburbs. Really, they kind of mirror train stations, and it makes sense. If you have a train station like Bentley or Cheltenham, you can put more people into high density apartments around the train station. They can, if they work in the city, they can jump onto a train, they can walk to the train station, and you can create high density apartments in those suburbs with the idea of creating more solutions for housing, because we've got a massive housing problem at the moment in Melbourne. There's not enough houses to go in and go around, I should say. We've got record high migration on the back of Labor just opening up the flood gates and letting a million migrants coming into the country without any solutions or any planning about where they're going to be living and what they're going to be doing. So you can see that the activity centres pretty much mirror the actual train stations and different zones. I'm going to show you 10 of them, and I'm going to just share my ideas with you, but I think what will happen. So you have the activity centre will have high density apartments, depending on the suburb, and I'll unpack this in more detail. The inner catchment will have lower density and the outer catchment will have low density, which is detached houses. So pretty much like a European model where you have apartments in the city and in key suburbs, and as you go further out, there's less infrastructure. You're going to have more townhouses and then eventually larger houses, which is fine in theory, okay? Let me unpack it more in detail. So, for example, these are some of the earmarked activity centres that have been highlighted now. Broadmeadows Activity Centre. I mean, I wouldn't touch Broadmeadows, the 10-foot pole. I wouldn't even drive through the suburb. Camberwell's phenomenal. I mean, Camberwell Junction is a great area, and look, the problem with Camberwell, though, it's going to be very expensive. I had lunch in Camberwell at George's restaurant there, just near the junction, with a developer who does high density apartments. He's done many developments over the last 40 years. And I asked him, what's going to be the impact? And this is a multi-millionaire property developer that owns a huge construction company in Melbourne, and they do high density residential and mixed usage, commercial as well, office space, medical clinics, business centres. And he said to me, listen, the reality is, even if they gave me the land for free and I was forced to build apartments, which I'm not going to in the next 2 years to do anything, I'm waiting for the whole market to settle, I would need to sell them for around 14,000, 15,000 a square metre to make any sense at all. And that's going at builder's range. So if you look at, for example, an average two-bedroom, like a apartment, I'm just going to grab my calculator to do some basic numbers, because this is the problem with designating these areas. So let's say you have a one-bedroom apartment, which is 55 square metres, times 15,000 per square metre, you're looking at $825,000, right, for one bedder, to make it sustainable for him to even entertain the notion of developing in Camberwell. And this guy he doesn't live in Camberwell, he actually lives in Kew, but he's, which is a few suburbs away from Camberwell. Two bedders usually, one bed is 55 square metres, two bedrooms are 80 square metres, 85, let's say 85 for an average. So 85 square metres times 15,000, you're looking at 1.275 million, right? That's a lot of money. I mean, you can get a house in a decent suburb for 1.275 million. You know, like Wanturna, Meacham, for example, you can get a house. Forest Hill. Now, three bedders, right? You need at least 165 square meters for a three-bedroom apartment. That's not even being generous. That's just being the minimum floor space to have a normal functioning room with some area around it. So 165 times 15,000 a square meter, you're looking at 2.475 million. So let me ask you this. How is a three-bedroom apartment in Camberwell at 2.475 million going to solve the issue with housing supply? The numbers just don't work. And this is the problem. So it's well and good to just, allocate these areas and say, we're going to allow more density to be built in these suburbs. But who's going to build them, number one, at what costs and what margin? And this is what Labor has no experience in because they're career politicians. They have never built anything. They're not even investors. Which is crazy. So it's just a bunch of theorists saying if we designate it, then the private sector will come in and build it. Well, the private sector has been decimated. I'll show you what the reality is. Chatston's fine. Chatston's a boring suburb. I don't like Chatston Shopping Centre. It's too big. You park there and you don't know where your car is. You got to get a taxi to drive you around the car park. Epping, Epping is very rough still. It's not bad. It's up and coming. It has a lot of potential in the future, but it's a gentrification suburb. Frankston's too far from Melbourne. I wouldn't touch Frankston. Moorabbin's phenomenal. I think Moorabbin, when I was growing up and I went so I'm 48, nearly 49. When I was growing up when I was 16, 17, Moorabbin, especially Moorabbin next to the airport where DFO is, probably was the worst suburb in the Bayside, in that kind of beachy area, of Melbourne. So let's call it Port Melbourne to Aspendale. It was the arse end. It was the worst. It was worse than Cheltenham. It was worse than High. It was just a shit area. And it was semi-industrial. In Moorabbin has a lot of, these kind of weird factories where they make some aluminium window frames. And there's a whole section that's just semi-industrial. You've got panel beaters and you've got people that spray cars and then you have, all this weird stuff. The cool thing is now, because Bentley East and all the surrounding suburbs around Moorabbin have become so expensive, Moorabbin's kind of in the middle, and so the land is going up in value so much that a lot of these factories now are being redeveloped into high-end warehouses or burger joints, wine bars. So Moorabbin's actually becoming a really cool and trendy hub, and a lot of these old warehouses are turning into these really cool cafes and gyms and all sorts of activity centres. So people from Bentley East, Hampton East, all the surrounding areas are going to Moorabbin, Cheltenham East, and it's becoming a really cool suburb. So I've got a lot of faith in Moorabbin. I think Moorabbin needs an injection of life. It definitely needs, more apartments, more townhouses. Needridge, fantastic. Essendon has always been, top 20 suburb in Melbourne. Preston, I'm not interested in Preston that much. Now, what does it mean? So if you look at, and I'm not going to go through 60 activity centres, but this is a map of Broadmeadows, for example. You can see there the different colour zoning. So what they've done is they're trying to fast track development approvals for developers, and they've designated specific sections of the suburb where they're going to allow for the first time high density apartments. So, for example, in the kind of orange section, for example, they're doing that's a shopping centre up to 12 stories. In this kind of here where they're doing 12 stories, and then here as well 12 stories, and then 4 stories catchment area. So as you get further away from the train station, which is transport, they're trying to get more people to use the transport rather than drive cars. So therefore there's more solution. The problem is the Broadmeadows is a very small car park. If you don't get there by, let's say, 6:30 in the morning, you pretty much can't park anywhere near it. So that's something that the government hasn't made allowances for, is car parks. You're going to have to build massive car parks around train stations if you want all this density to function. And as you further get out, the density and the height gets lower and lower, okay? Camberwell Junction is already there's apartments there already, but you can see they're 6 to 12 stories. So there's going to be more density. There's going to be more relaxing planning around. Setbacks, height restrictions will be eased. So the actual envelope of each block will be changed, so you can put more townhouses per block. So before, let's say, I'm completely making this up. On the 1,000 square meters, you can put 6 townhouses. Now you'll be able to put in 10. Okay, and you'll be able to go triple story with rooftop terraces. So what they're trying to do is strategically, and I don't blame them for attempting to do this, is to create more density around shopping strips and precincts and train stations in order to create more dense dwellings and solve the affordability issue. It's not going to work though, guys, and I'll show you why it's not going to work. This is Chatston, which is fine. I mean, look at the size of Chatston shopping centre; it's huge. It's like half the suburb. It's like it just keeps growing. Dandenong Road, yeah, fine, no problem. You know, it's not really. I wouldn't invest there. It's a boring suburb. Epping, yeah, Epping is up and coming. If you're in a budget, it's a good area to definitely, you know, your money will go far. You get townhouses there for 600,000. It's still pretty rough, but it's fine. It's very well appointed with train stations. You got Lalo and Epping train station. So apartments in Epping, interesting. The land's going to be super cheap. So if they can get the price right, it could be something to look at in the future. It is far from the city though. And it still has this very low income demographic, so you just got to be careful. Frankston is just too far from the city. It's like a beachside suburb. I mean, I've got no problem with Frankston in terms of the nicety of the area. Frankston South is lovely. Oliver's Hills, great. All those areas. Frankston itself, average, and Frankston North is a disaster area. But it's too far from the city. It's never really had good capital growth. There's like 100 suburbs you can buy closer to the city than Frankston for the same price. Like, for example, you can buy Heidelberg Heights for $1,125,000 for a 4-bedder, which is 12 k's from the city, versus Frankston, which is like 35 k's from the city. So why would you, for investment, it doesn't make sense. If you like the beach and you want to live there for lifestyle, I completely get it. Frankston's cool, no problem. I'm purely talking about capital growth potential and rental yield. Moorabbin's fantastic, and Moorabbin actually would work really well if they can pull it off. I'm just worried about, well, I'm not really worried. I don't kind of have sleepless nights and wake up in the sweat thinking about car park restrictions in Moorabbin. I couldn't care less. But what they're going to have a challenge with is car parks, because Moorabbin train station is a very old train station. Same with Patterson. There's no car parks. If you don't get there by 7 o'clock in the morning, you can't get a car park. So it's all well and truly to build thousands of apartments everywhere. You know, but a lot of these people will drive ultimately and will try to park. Unless they walk there, there's going to be parking issues. Niagara is great. Niagara is fantastic. You know, Essendon is one of the top suburbs in Melbourne. Definitely Pascoe Vale South, great suburbs. So this is actually going to be quite good. There's already apartments being built everywhere on Mount Alexandra Road and Keilor Road. It's nothing new. So, you know, they're building them on top of shops. Great as well. Preston, I never don't care about Preston at all. It's a nothing area. Ringwood, it's too far. Ringwood, it's pretty much for people that want to live, you know, in the green kind of eastern suburbs. They've already done developments on Maroondah Highway. God knows why. They look pretty cool. I was there the other day getting my car wash, a laser wash. I was there with developer having a coffee. And look, Ringwood's fantastic. A lot of cafes, restaurants. Maroondah Highway is really cool. There's no question about it. It's just so far from the city. I just wouldn't buy apartments there. Well, you can pay the same apartment you can buy in St Kilda, which is so much closer to the city than Ringwood. It doesn't make sense. Unless you live there and work there and your family's there, there's no point investing in Ringwood, guys. You know, same with Havdale. It's just no point. It's too far from the city. It's more of a lifestyle area than an investment area. Remember, you want to, as an investor, you're looking for ways to reject properties. You're not looking to, don't look for a reason to invest somewhere, look for a reason to reject an area, and whatever's left over, you invest in. So Broadmeadows, this is the end result. There's going to be discretionary up to 12-story apartments being built, and they're trying to get this to create a solution to the housing supply, which is now at critical low levels. So in Broadmeadows, they're trying to create another 3,000 to 4,500 homes. Homes being loosely relating to apartments, townhouses, and detached houses. You know, Camberwell Junction, 7,500 to 10,100 homes. Chatston, 6,500 to 8,000 homes. Epping, 9,800 to 13,900 homes. Frankston, 4,000 to 6,300. Moorabbin, 5,000 to 6,800. Niagara, 3,400 to 3,900. Essendon North, 5,100 to 6,100, 200, sorry. Preston, 11,800 to 15,300. And Ringwood, 8,200, 12,200. Now, remember, this is, and look, Ringwood's got up to 20-story towers being built. Now, this is like all the properties, once they all get rezoned and they get, developed by a private sector. Remember, the government doesn't build homes, the private sector builds homes. What they're trying to do here is fast track approvals and development approvals and building approvals to make sure, and also ignore some of the previous restrictions that were imposed on these suburbs in terms of protecting the character of the streets. I mean, Bentley's like that. There's parts of Bentley now where there's apartments, and there's parts of Bentley where there's still houses. Personally, I think it destroys suburbs because you're changing the actual demographics of suburbs, unless the demographics is the same. But if you're going to a rich area like Brighton, for example, and you're trying to put apartments in that are cheap, which you can't do anyway, because the numbers don't stack up, you're actually changing the nature of the demographics. Is it necessary? Yes. This could take 30, 40 years, by the way, for these stock to be developed. It all sounds wonderful, but here's the problem, guys. The problem is this. We've had one of the worst prime ministers on record in my lifetime, definitely. The Albanese Penny Wong government is just embarrassing. It's cringeworthy. I can't emphasize that enough. There is useless as tits on the bull. He's a spineless prime minister. He wants to make everyone happy, and therefore he has no direction and just doesn't make any decisions, because doesn't want to piss off any minority group. I'm not a big fan of Dutton either as a person, but at least he's got an opinion on things and he will have a direction. And one of the things we have to address is youth crime, which is out of control in Victoria, like it is in Queensland. We've got to just lock away these kids and throw away the key, as far as I'm concerned. Now, since going back to property investing, and I apologize for my rants about politics, and I'm only talking about this because it is related to property investing. Under the Albanese government, we've had the worst record for insolvencies in the history of our country. And you can see that the amount of thousands of insolvencies we've had. The Electoral Commission estimated the referendum, the Yes campaign, cost us $450 million as taxpayers, and then 60%, nearly 61%, said no, because it's divisive. You can't do a reconciliation with yourself. We're all Australian, guys. I'm from Poland originally, but I'm Australian. I don't care where you come from. If you're in the country and you play by the rules, you're an Aussie. That's it. That's what we are. We're all migrants. We all have a background. This thing about Indigenous versus, colonial, it's all bullshit to me. We're all equal in this country, and anything that divides us, it shouldn't be in existence. And this was divisive in nature. I recognize previous people that were here. It's all cool. I'm all cool with it. Now, I'm not talking about politics so much. I'm talking about the fact is that rather than spending the $450 million on this stupid campaign, they should have used that money to subsidize developers and builders that went bankrupt during the actual COVID-19. We were locked down, as you know, in Victoria for nearly 2 years. And we've had thousands and thousands of developers and builders in the private sector go bankrupt. So if you look at the number of insolvencies, the biggest industry that was affected by that under Labor was the construction industry. 7,000 bankruptcies and insolvencies. Food and accommodation was second, and then others, right? Now, if you look at month by month, you can see there construction industry insolvencies. So a lot of developers and builders went bust in the last, since 2021, really, which was a direct result of COVID-19 lockdowns under our, dictator Dan. So if you look at June 22, for example, we've had 1,197 building companies go into administration, which is crazy. In June 23, 2,118. In June 24, 2,830. Now, this is across the state. We've had, 7,000 across Australia. Now, remember, when a builder goes down, not only do they take down their company and staff, they usually go bad, and they usually don't pay a lot of invoices that are outstanding. And it's the little guy that gets burnt. The electrician, the tiler, the landscaping company. So for every developer that goes down, let's say the developer has, 30 staff, they've got an office building, they all lose their jobs, they go insolvent. There could be another 15 or 20 little companies or subsidiaries that also go insolvent because they haven't been paid from this developer. Okay, so the best use of that 550 million, in my opinion, would have been to subsidise these companies, give them tax-funded, interest-deferred loans to get them through those periods of time where they were waiting for projects to be completed. They just run out of cash, but they were still functional. Now, when developers go bust, and I know a number of developers that have gone bust in the last 5 years, it's very difficult on them psychologically. It's not only a financial thing. It's not like they just shut the doors, jump into the Lambo and drive off into the sunset. A lot of them lose their marriage. They have extreme psychological trauma. They don't recover. A lot of them turn to drugs, alcohol. They become self-destructive. There's a lot of psychological impact that people don't talk about in this country, which is the impact of losing a company. I mean, if, imagine this, you've built a business over 20 years, or you've taken that over from your father, and then suddenly you've lost the whole company and you've gone bankrupt, and because of personal guarantees, you've lost your house. A lot of them lose their marriage, they lose everything. So what I'm saying is a lot of these developers will never come back. Okay, they're not. It's not like they go, oh well, that was the bankruptcy. Let's have a week off and then go to Queensland and come back. No, a lot of them will never come back. So what we've had created is we've had a massive drain on talent in the country, which I don't believe will recover for the next 20, even 30 years. We've lost, forget about one generation, I reckon we've lost 3 generations of developers, true entrepreneurs that have gone bankrupt, that will never recover, and that void will stay there indefinitely. And why am I talking about this? Because for this plan to work, for Labor to create all these houses, you need the private sector to be fully functional. And the private sector in the construction industry has been completely decimated to the point where we've never seen before. And I think they're incapable of creating anywhere near the numbers that Labor is hoping for to address the supply part of the equation. And that's the reality that no one's talking about, So the government comes in and says, oh, let's build more townhouses, apartments and houses in infill areas. Fantastic. We're going to cut through all the red tape. We're going to make it super simple to get a permits and plans in place and fast track everything. Great. But who's going to build it? We've lost thousands of developers, thousands of them. And the ones that are still around, and I know a lot of them, I know compared to the whole market, I know a fraction. I deal with about 65 developing companies, maybe 70 in my company, that we've had relations over the last 11 years. A lot of them have shelved all their projects. They're not developing anything. They're waiting for this whole thing to kind of stabilize. And so, there's this thing about just suddenly everyone going back and building apartments and townhouses. It's not going to happen, guys. The volume that Labor wants to build infill is just not going to happen. It will take decades. I think it could take 30 years to get. You got to have a new pool of people literally go through high school and TAFE, and a lot of them either become entrepreneurs and developers, or some of them become tradies who turn developers. A bricklayer after 20 years goes, mate, I can just do this myself. Real estate agents sometimes turn developers, builders, site supervisors, but it takes a decade, it takes years for them to make that decision. They can't just be replaced the next day, because developing is a very entrepreneurial kind of an activity. It's a person that kind of puts deals together. That's got to be, it's a risk taker. There's an element of unknown, uncertainty. It's not an employee kind of a psychology person. So the reason I'm showing you these numbers is because they just don't work, guys. It's all theory. Nothing's going to happen in the industry. People say, do you think these activity centres are going to create an oversupply? Are you kidding me? It's not even a drop in the ocean. There's going to be nothing. Fast tracking a project from 6 months or 12 months down to 3 months, that's fine, but who's going to build it? You still got to borrow the money. You still got to take the risk. You still got to do all those things. And because of that, I think these activity centres will have no impact on the market at all in Australia, because at the bottom level, the migration that's coming in far exceeds the volume of production that we are capable of producing as a nation. And there's always going to be a catch-up scenario. Every government will make promises, and those promises will fail. Labor hasn't built one home yet, and they promised 2 years ago to build, 1 million homes? Where are they? Not one has been built. It's crazy. Now, all that news is actually good for investors, because number one is lower stock volume creates more pressure on price point. That's why I'm doing this video, to share with you and unpack this topic, because people are going to be saying, oh, there's all these activity centres, 60 new suburbs going to be rezoned. There's going to be too much supply. That's only in theory. You got to produce the supply. No one's there to produce it. Now, let's talk about land tax, because land tax has changed because Victoria has been bankrupted by the Labor government and we're just handing out money to everyone. The only way to get the money back is the Labor government increased land tax under our favourite dictator, Dan, who's in hiding now, I think. I don't know where he is. And land tax has changed the game, because now, as an investor, it's virtually unfeasible to buy an old house on a big block of land and hold on to it, because land tax will kill your cash flow completely. So let me just show you, and I did this in another video, but I want to revisit it here because this is what you got to focus on. I want to show you, as an investor, what do you need to know in Melbourne and what do you need to have as a governing modem of operation when you're making decisions about buying properties. So land tax is basically tax which is based on ownership of land. It's very simple. Basically, there's a threshold. So if the land component of the property is less than 50,000, you pay no tax. 50,000 to 100 is $500, then 975. From 100 to 300, 300 to 600,000 is 1,350 plus 0.3%. We under 300,000. 600 to a million is 2,250 plus 0.6 of the amount under 600,000. 1 million to 1.8 is 4,500 or 4,650 plus 0.9 of the amount under a million. 1.8 million to 3 million is 11,850 plus 1.65% of the amount of over 1.8 million. And then 3 million plus is 31,000. Now, this is the thing. If you want to buy an old house on a big block and the value is purely the land, because land goes up, properties appreciate, if it's over $1 million, you're paying 4,600 plus per year just in land tax. Then council rates, that's like 10 grand just there off the top, and you got low rental yield. So if you look at 300,000, for example, for let's say you buy an average townhouse in Carnegie, your land will be 300,000. You're paying 1,350 in land tax per year. If it's 500,000, it's 2,000. 750, you're looking at 3,150, and the million, which is an old house in Carnegie, $1 million plus for land, 4,650. If it's 1.5 million, which is plenty of housing in Carnegie, where the house is completely depreciated. So if the house is more than 40 years old, by the way, it has no value. It's just, so you basically just land and improve it, unless it's a significant size property. But if it's a California bungalow or some weatherboard house in Carnegie, and it's worth 1.7, it's just land value basically. But look at this, you're paying 9,150 for land of 1.5 million. For $2 million, which is a good, decent block in a good suburb, you're paying 15,000 per year in land tax. Wow. Imagine that off the top, before you even get started, before any other expense, insurance, upkeeping, property management, 15,150. This is why 71.6% of investors only have one investment property. Only 0.9% have more than 6. So if you look at house and land versus townhouses versus apartments, what do you need to buy and which makes more sense? Now, apartments are just doomed in Melbourne, right? They just don't work at all. They've been a complete waste of time for investors. People who have purchased apartments 10 years ago, so we're talking 2015 in Dockland, South Bank, even places like St Kilda, places like Richmond, 2 bedders for $750, now they're worth $750. 10 years later, inflation's 3-4%, and the property is worth the same, and they're paying owners corporation. So they actually eroded the capital base. Now, eventually, apartments will go up because they've been smashed so much. The volume of stock has actually plummeted, and a lot of developers just couldn't get pre-sales. So, and I've shown you tables before. I did a whole YouTube video just on apartments, and it's like a record low volume. Like it's literally like the lowest we've ever seen in Melbourne. So Melbourne apartments, I would stay away from them like a late night P. Diddy party. I did a video on YouTube back in 21 talking about what type of apartments to focus on, and I would still target the same ones that I did that video on. I talk about plans, negative space, layouts, but I would target Art Deco apartments in Armadale, Ormond, Caulfield, St Kilda West, with a large land component predominantly on the ground floor. Brighton East, the older apartments where there's 6 or 10 on the block. Malvern is another good area, Windsor, South Yarra, and you got this land component. So eventually it's going to be purchased by a developer, and you'll make a lot of money, and then they'll be redeveloped into high density apartments. So yeah, definitely the Art Deco apartments, 1930s kind of apartments, definitely. I did another video here on YouTube on my channel. You can check it out. Has the apartment market in Melbourne bottomed out yet? Is it a good time to buy? And there was a report from Chartered Kramer saying just replacing apartments is going to go up by 10, 15%, even 20%, which is true. And this is one of the challenges that we have right now is it's all well and good to rezone an area from low density to high density 20 story apartment development, but you're still going to make money as a developer. You can't build something for free. They're not a charity. And if you're selling something a minimum 15,000 a square meter, 14 will be like builder's range, ugly and small, but 15,000 just the average. And I've spoken to 3 developers in Melbourne that do apartments. They said it's completely unfeasible and they would never do a development again because there's too much risk with pre-sales. They can't get pre-sold and they can't get the project off the ground. And the amount of apartment developers that have been shelved in Melbourne is huge. So Melbourne apartments, they're a trap. If you want to live in a suburb and there's no option and you can't afford a house there, buy an apartment. If you want to live in Camberwell, you can't buy a house for $3 million. You get a 2-bed for 750, 800 to $1 million. I understand that, but that's an owner-occupied property. That's not an investment property. The numbers for apartments, there's no capital growth. You might get the rental yield, but there's no capital growth in apartments in Melbourne compared to townhouses and houses. And this is Melbourne investors dump apartments and massive losses. You can see there, this is inner city apartment rents have collapsed across Melbourne. So Melbourne weekly rent, for example, Melbourne, which is 3,000 postcode, the median. This is from last year, by the way, from 2024. Apartments have lost 29.1%, and the rent is $390. Docklands, another area, 27.6% loss. South Bank, 24.1%. Carlton's a great suburb for townhouses and houses. Terrible for apartments, 23.9%. West Melbourne, one of the top suburbs in Melbourne for houses and townhouses, 21%. McLeod, I don't even know why you buy there, 20%. South Melbourne, great suburb, 17.9%. East Melbourne, another great suburb. Albert Park, top 10 suburb in Melbourne always. By the way, St Vincent's Place in Albert Park, per square meter, is the most expensive real estate in Melbourne. Per square meter, not by price. So it's Toorak, obviously, in Hawthorn, but per square meter, St Vincent's Place is the most expensive, negative 15.8%, and North Melbourne, negative 15.6%. These are really good inner city suburbs, and look at the results. So if you want to live in these suburbs, get it. Be prepared to have no capital growth. You have the suburb, though, which is cool. But in terms of parking your money there in apartments, don't do it. It's a trap. So apartments are virtually, I wouldn't touch apartments for the next 5 years in Melbourne at all. There's been countless, examples of apartments just doing nothing. The gap between houses and apartments now is record high. Consumers have turned against them. You can see the housing in Melbourne, 929,000 is in 21, and then apartment 610. They haven't moved since. The gap is getting wider and wider. They used to be the same virtually. Okay, and you can see there, this is the release of apartments in Melbourne up to 22, record low, and that's even lower now because no one wants to buy them. They can't get pre-sales. So stay away from apartments, guys. Don't invest in them. You're better off buying anything but apartments. House and land. With houses, you have old houses in inner suburbs, which are cool. Okay, there's just a challenge with cash flow, which I'll show you in a second, and negative gearing and land tax. But in terms of capital growth, no problem. Old house in a good suburb on the big block will always go up in value. Okay, so there's no question there. The question is, how many of them can you buy? How can you structure yourself to own these properties? That's the challenge. If you're looking at the house and land estates, they're a complete disaster in Melbourne. And so I wouldn't touch them. I did a video on this some time ago in 23 about Melbourne house and land estate traps. And I specifically targeted Truganina and Tarneit because they've been featured so many times in special AR reports about Melbourne's best hotspot suburbs. And listen to this video if you're interested in house and land, or if you're thinking of living in Truganina and Tarneit, I encourage you to watch that video. It actually is a video featuring locals living in the suburb and talking about all the challenges they have, just getting to work, being trapped, in trains on the highway for an hour. It's only 35 km from the city, but it takes an hour to get there, even an hour and a half. No infrastructure, no transport, no schools, nothing. Now, this is another area that I've been hearing about, which is Thornhill Park. And it's been featured in a lot of hotspot reports through these independent research companies. I wanted to show you a quick video on Thornhill Park and what are the challenges with this. And yeah, the population growth is record high. You got to understand something, guys. If you've got a cow paddock and there's a farmer Joe living there, and you put one other person, that's 100% growth. Right? Because one person increased by one person is 100% increase, right? If you put two people there, then you got 200% increase, right? So yes, these estates have the highest population growth, but they have no capital growth and they have no infrastructure, transport or anything. And people wait for decades to get anything built in them. So check out this video and I'll come back straight after the video and talk about other options for you to invest in.
Picture this. A suburb just outside of one of our biggest capital cities with nothing, no medical centre, no public transport and not a supermarket in sight. Welcome to Thornhill Park.
We have no public transport.
We have no medical centre.
We don't have one shop here. A high school would be great.
Thornhill Park. It's about a 40-minute drive from the centre of Melbourne, and it's a place where residents come only to have their dream lifestyles hit a wall.
We'd sort of just been at a standstill for a very long time.
Since 2015, the suburb in Melbourne's outer west was advertised by developers as accessible and convenient. But instead, families see it as a place with
no future.
I feel like I'm living in a developing country.
We're asking for what I believe are just basic human rights.
There's 6,500 residents who call this suburb home. Yet there's no high school, no supermarket, no pharmacy, no doctor's surgery, no restaurants, no gym, no police station. There's not even a milk bar. So, what is there?
There is nothing.
Nothing?
Priya and her husband Gagandeep moved into Thornhill Park 18 months ago.
This is our first house, first home. Not happy at all. Always begging to please sell this house so we can find a better place.
Their biggest gripe, this dirt road.
If they ever fix this road, we can actually save our 20 minutes to go back to the freeway from the back roads.
The young parents say if you can't drive a car, you're stranded in Thornhill Park because the trains don't stop and the buses don't come.
Can't even catch a bus because we don't have a bus. Can't catch a train because we don't have a train station.
Nathan Burns-Gramont bought here 7 years ago. He loves the community but loathes the lifestyle.
We're fighting as hard as we can as a community, but we just keep getting kicked back down to the ground.
According to these families, the place is almost unlivable.
I dropped my husband at Cobblebank train station. He got himself to work in Melbourne CBD before I had even made it home to Thornhill Park.
That's because there's no convenient way in and out of the suburb. An advertised overpass is yet to be built. Families are forced to drive backwards out of town just to go forwards, and it's a U-turn that can take up to half an hour. Even delivery drivers have given Thornhill Park a wide berth.
Menulog struggle to come here. Uber Eats, forget about it. Local pizza stores down in Melton won't come here because of the length it takes to do a U-turn.
Since its inception more than 7 years ago, the suburbs quickly become a paradise lost. All that was advertised, not yet delivered. The medical centre's apparently getting built. The kindergarten is opening soon. The proposed supermarket has recently been downgraded to a mini-mart, and land has been fenced off in the so-called Central Square ever since we visited last year. Since our report in June 2022, all these residents have got is a primary school and a childcare centre.
We've now been classified as a city of Melbourne also, but still being treated like a rural area.
I certainly feel for them.
Steve McGee is the MP for Melton.
There's nothing planned for a train station to come right now, and there's no funding for a train station right now.
As for an overpass...
Yes, it will be years away. There were never commitments made, well, in particular the train station, never commitments made by the state government. And unfortunately, developers don't build train stations and overpasses onto freeways.
One of the 6 developers involved in Thornhill Park is Welco, founded by former Essendon footballer Andrew Welsh.
It's performed, really well for us, Thornhill Park, this year.
In a statement to A Current Affair, Welco said all the information it's provided has been accurate.
Welco has relied on the government's advice from the beginning of its Thornhill Park development, informing prospective purchasers of the government's plans and specifically noting that actual delivery of both the train station and freeway interchange is solely within the government's control.
Welco say marketing materials included disclaimers that timeframes were indicative only and subject to change.
And if government don't get developers to set aside land for infrastructure, then there's no potential to build a train station.
Steve's advice to would-be buyers is to get concrete timeframes from developers.
I think developers promote their development in the best possible way they can with the most amount of selling points that they can. I think people buying in should just make sure that developers in their commitment have given timeframes and then follow up with the respective government levels.
For now, these residents will have to settle for the only trader in town. At least he comes to them.
I just want to get out of here.
And a shopping square is expected to be built by the end of the year. That still seems a long way off.
Great. I hope you enjoyed that video, guys. And that highlights what I think about house and land estates in Melbourne. And no one talks about this unless you go to Current Affairs 60 Minutes or you go to the locals and actually talk to them. These marketing companies will never show you this part of house and land estates in Melbourne, and it's a suburb with nothing basically in it. So what we come down to is townhouses and old houses, which is really cool because they're very good options. House in a good suburb on a big block that's been depreciated and a brand new townhouse. That is a cool option. So let's look at a case study. I'm not going to go for Toorak and Hawthorn, and I'm not going to go for some really bad area either. Let's go for a nice, solid suburb called Carnegie. It's a great suburb. It's a trendy suburb. It's middle class, going into a trendy, surrounded by Malvern East, Murrumbina, Caulfield South, Bentley. Good transport, good access to the city. Just a normal, average, upmarket, normal, good suburb, right? And obviously has a lot of younger people moving there. It's trendy. You've got cafes, restaurant, good transport. You've got the Caulfield racecourse there that's getting developed as well. Now, this is a development that I saw some time ago, and I just want to contrast why townhouses are your number one wealth creation vehicle when it comes to building a property portfolio, not an old house. Now, this is in Tremere Street in Carnegie. It's a development that we sourced. It's one of 14. It was sold, I should say, for $1.4 million in 2023. There's the actual property itself. These are artist impressions of the internals. These are actual photos of the property itself. So it's like a bread and butter townhouse, architecturally designed, very good location, in a normal street, close to trains, walking distance to train station, walking distance to shops, walking distance to coffee, gym, pizza, everything, right? So downstairs, ground floor, you have double car garage. You've got it could be a Zoom room or a bedroom. And a lot of this configuration is becoming very popular now with young people, where they want to separate the living area from where they are. and having clients coming and having just Zoom conferences. So downstairs, Zoom room, you got a bit of a courtyard where you can put a little table, have a barbecue for your friends. Then on the first floor, open plan living, kitchen, island bench top. You've got an ensuite there as well, a toilet with a laundry. And then upstairs, you've got 3 bedrooms, and then you've got an ensuite for the master bedroom, and then you've got a toilet for the other 2 bedrooms. Just a normal 3-bedroom townhouse. Nothing special, but nothing average either. Good, solid, $1.4 million property. Total area, 238 square meters. That includes the courtyard, okay? Now, let's look at the same price for Carnegie for an older house. So we have a land component of 592 square meters. Because remember, the townhouse only has a small footprint of, let's say, 100 square meters. But that's really good for land tax. This is an example of a property that was sold, 592. I didn't source this property, by the way, just from the open market. Sold for 23 for 1.4 million, okay? Old house, good bones, did a reno. You can see air conditioning. There's probably renovation there done as well. Kitchen was upgraded. But all means it's an original house in Carnegie on a decent block. You know, your bread and butter house in Carnegie. Rental yield's very low because it's an old house. Now, let's contrast the two because I want to show you something very important to understand about structuring your portfolio. So number one is you've got the new townhouse versus the old house. So you've got the land component on the townhouse is 125 square meters. On the old house is 592. Now, the townhouse will always underperform the house, just 1 for 1. So if the house is doing 9%, the townhouse is doing 7%, right? Land value is $400,000 for that footprint and 1.25 million for the old house. The land tax on the townhouse is $1,650 per year. On the old house, it's $7,335. Look at the difference: $1,650 versus $7,350. The rental yield is massively different because yuppies want brand new townhouses with bedrooms, air conditioning, brand new kitchen. Not an old house that smells like a dog from the 70s, right? So rental yield's 4.5, $1,200 a week, which is exactly what they're renting for. The house is 3%, which is $800 a week. Huge difference, $400 difference. So you're getting $63,000 for the townhouse, $41,600 for the house. Depreciation, you have 40 years of depreciation on the building, no depreciation for the detached house. Now, you also have depreciation on fixtures and fittings of $30,000, which is cabinetry, kitchen, joinery, all that stuff, air conditioning, oven. You've got no depreciation on fixtures and fittings in the old house because it's all very old. Future maintenance, minimum with brand new properties because you got all the builder's warranties, manufacturing warranties, 7-year building warranty. There's maximum future maintenance for an old house from the 50s and 60s. And I'll do another video on some of my properties that are old houses from the 50s and 60s to show you how many thousands of dollars I'm spending on them every year just to maintain them. The quality of the tenant is high, white-collar professional in the townhouse, low to moderate because the rent is just lower. Future risk is low for the townhouse, high for the house. Now, if you look at $400,000 for the townhouse, if you chuck that into the state revenue office, your land tax is $1,650, and for the old house for 1.3 million is $7,350. So if you do the comparison in terms of cash flow analysis, this is what it is and this is for the townhouse in Carnegie, 1.4 million, 8% capital growth, interest rate 6.5, taxable income is 250. This is actually the client's cash flow analysis. You can see there. This is the property purchase price. You've got conveyancing $2,500, stamp duty $77,000 before the stamp duty concessions kicked in. Transfer of title, and so you're paying $82,878 at settlement. Then you got lender's mortgage insurance of $19,217. They're borrowing 90%. So the investment there is $140,000 deposit, which is 10%, and then balance on completion. So you need $222,878 in cash to buy that property for $1.4 million. Interest only 6.5% because you only do interest only for loans. The loan is 1.28 million. Loan costs can be written over 5 years, 21,101. Monthly payment 6,939. So you're repaying 83,272 per year. Weekly rental is 1,200, which is 62,400, which is 61,152 for the year. Now, if you go through, these are your expenses. So these are your cash expenses, which you have to pay for, like with every property. So you got property management fee, 7% plus GST, $4,709. Letting fee, $1,200. Council rates, insurance, body corporate, land tax, water connection, $11,999, which is 19.21% of your rental, which is fine. That's like an average. Should be between 20 and 25% maximum. If it's more than that, then I wouldn't recommend it. So once again, you get depreciation on the building, and the building is 40 years of depreciation at $700,000 at 2.5%. You're getting $17,500 back, and then you got fixtures and fittings about $25,000. All in all, for that property, the cash flow in the first year, it's negative by $5,862, then $4,105, $2,075, $1,072. Cash flow positive in year 5 by $616. So for this person, that's on $250,000. The property's cash flow negative by, let's say, $10,000, $11,000, $12,000, right? And then it's cash flow positive. Now, remember, when you're buying properties, the quicker it's cash flow positive, the sooner you can buy your next property, because if it's draining your equity and your money, you're using more money psychologically to pay for that property, but also from a stability perspective, the sooner it's cash flow positive, the sooner you can buy more property. The person's on $250,000, so $250,000 plus the rental. So you remember your rental income is just like working overtime. So $250,000 income plus $61,152. Taxable income goes to $311,152. The rent deductions are $121,252. So your new taxable income goes down to $189,900. The deductions are, by the way, interest repayments and all the expenses, including land tax, council rates, everything. Current tax on $250,000 is $90,000, which is huge, nearly $100,000. A lot of my clients are engineering clients. They make $250,000 a year. They just keep paying it $90,000. I keep telling them buy property every year. No, that's fine. We'll just pay the $90,000. We're happy. We're happy to contribute to Albanese's Yes campaign, which is cool. No problem. New tax is $189, $62,350. Tax saving $28,247. So that person can buy 3 properties and they virtually have no tax left, right? Now with the house, if we go through the same numbers. 1.4 million, 8% growth, 6.5% loan, same taxable income, right? Look at the cash flow. Negative 28,000 in the first year, then 27, 26. Look at the negative cash flow. It's massive. So this is why majority of Australians just buy one old house in the suburb they live in. So live in Carnegie in a house, you just buy another house in Carnegie, you're paying $30,000 a year in tax, after tax dollars to maintain it. You don't want to know about a second property. So in terms of houses, the old house outperforms the townhouse. But in terms of, in the context of finance, buying an old house with the current land tax is virtually the end of your property investing as you know it. You're maxed out with one property. And this is why townhouses are the only vehicle that's sustainable. We can buy lots of them and replace your income. And look at the pre-tax cash flow. Look at the cash flow after tax. $30,000, even on $250,000, that would hurt you. $30,000 a year. Okay, so that is the reason why people don't buy 10 old houses, and why if you buy a townhouse, it's nothing. And you're not getting the full growth, but you're getting nearly the good growth. You're getting 7% instead of 8, or 6% instead of 7. Look at the comparison, guys. It's like same price, 1.4 million, Carnegie, and the difference is massive. And it's all because of no depreciation, massive land tax. The land tax is a huge difference, and low rental yield. So in terms of your options, guys, it's apartments, forget about apartments, okay? Your only option is a townhouse or an old house. Now, if you want to build a large property portfolio, replace your income, townhouse is number one. If you just want to buy a bunch of properties, buy old houses, but remember, you're going to max out very quickly unless you've got extraordinarily high income, and you're not going to change your lifestyle. You won't be able to replace your income. It will take 2 decades to replace your income rather than something, quicker. Here's the hardest thing to understand by novice property investors. Property investing is about making money, not about buying pretty properties. You must fall in love with the numbers, not the aesthetics of the property. It's about content versus context. In the content of properties, old houses always outperform townhouses, but you can't buy 10 of them. It's impossible. You're going to max out. but you can get 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 townhouses depending on your income because of the low land tax and high rental yield and high depreciation. And that's the secret of building wealth. And that's why my clients are buying all these properties and then using the money to replace their income and then traveling the world doing whatever they want. The rest of Australians, the 72% are buying one old house in the same suburb they live in. And that's it. They never go to number 2 or 3. So to remember, it's about cash flow, and this is why financial literacy is so important. This is why I wrote the book, Australian Real Estate Investing Made Simple, because if you're not financially literate, guys, you can't crunch the numbers. You don't know what to look for. And this is exactly the number one determining factor. It's not the density of the suburb. It's not any future plans for the council. It literally comes down to how many can you control based on your income and tax. And then you just keep, whatever the option is, you just keep accumulating and accumulating. And that's it. So if you're interested in learning more, guys, I hope you enjoy this video. So to summarize, the average townhouse becomes cash flow neutral within 5, 6, 7 years. A house, 15 years plus. It's just unsustainable. Now, if you're interested in learning more, I am running a bunch of, number one is you can scroll down below, just grab the recording of my live event from a few years ago. My gift to you, no strings attached, with $497. You can just email, first name, email, and you can watch these videos immediately. And it's huge. It's going to make you lots of money. It covers all the things fundamentally that I've been covering just in this video, plus many, many more. You get a manual as well, 265-page manual, 10 hours of video. Number two, if you're interested in working with me personally one-on-one, I'm getting nearly now maxed out with clients, but I have a few spaces still available. So if you're a switched-on person that's coachable, and if you have good serviceability, you want to build a property portfolio in Melbourne with blue chip properties, drop me an email or contact me directly and we can do a Zoom call. We'll sit down for a 60-minute consultation. It's free of charge, no strings attached. I'll work out where you are, where you want to be, and turn an idea into a plan. And, you know, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. This will save you a lot of years of frustration and a lot of time. So many people that I see waste so many years doing the wrong thing, buying the wrong property for emotional reasons. They live in some town, in the regional town, they got 6 properties there or 5 properties. If they bought them in Melbourne, they would have tripled their income and tripled their wealth. So you got to look at it objectively, no emotion. I'm not a developer, guys, selling us any suburbs in Melbourne. I've got access to Melbourne's entire 321 suburbs, and I can choose any suburb I want. So, you know, it's a personalized strategy where you walk away with a clear plan. You also get an introduction to my mortgage broker, lawyer, accountant, anyone you need, banking specialists, right down to insurance specialists, building inspectors, property management, financial planners. If you want to set up a self-managed super fund, we can help you. These are all independent companies, by the way, that I've been using myself for many years. They've been around a lot longer than I have. These are some of the examples. They're on my course. So if you want to, the minimum, there is a qualifying criteria because serviceability is an issue. I don't source anything under 700,000. In fact, I've got a bunch of properties now for 679, which is rare. Most of the properties that I source are 850, the average being 1.2 to 1.4. So if you want to be, if you're a single person, you've got to at least make, say, 9,500 grand a year, have about 120 grand in equity. If you're a couple, 140 per year plus 120,000 in equity available, 112 to be exact. If you're interested, drop me an email, conrad@investorsprime.com.au, and we'll set up a mutually convenient time to catch up on Zoom. That's it from me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you on the inside.